Hi, my name is Jay, and I make finance videos. And today's video is going to be talking about some of the costs of buying a home. So a lot of people think, once they have their down payment, their 20% or whatever it might be, and they have the mortgage approved from the bank, they go out and buy that home, and then they're good to go. But there is one other step, and there's a lot of costs you actually have to pay in order to buy the home itself. And that's what we're going to break down right now. These are approximations, and these estimations are from CIBC, which is a bank in Canada, and it will vary based on your area, but I have checked out a number of other sort of banks that provide estimations for that, sort of lending institutions, and typically these sort of ballpark estimations are fairly similar, so they might vary a bit depending on where you live, but they're probably a pretty good ballpark for you. These ones are varies, and I'll get into that when I get to them. There's a reason that they are varied. So, property valuations. You're typically going to look somewhere between 150 and 200. What is a property valuation? Essentially, when you get a mortgage from the bank, it's the bank assessing the value of your property. And in most instances, what this is going to mean is that someone from the bank is going to drive by the home that you're looking to buy to make sure there's a home there. They're not typically going to go into the house itself and say, ooh, this is worth $816,000. Typically, it's just a drive-by to ensure there's an actual home on the property you say you're buying. In most instances, they might go a little bit more in depth if, say, you're buying an $18 million home. They want to make sure that it actually is something in the realm of $18 million, but it's typically just to ensure there is an actual house that you're looking to buy if you're saying you're buying a house. Home inspection. Very, very, very important. Home inspection is getting a contractor or someone who is knowledgeable about construction and other building issues to go into the home you're looking to buy and essentially making sure everything's in shape and everything works the way it's supposed to. And this is so incredibly important. When people are looking to sell their home, they want to make as much money as possible. They want to get as much. And so they like to hide the issues. They like to hide the problems that are there. So they want to hide the broken foundation. They want to hide the leaking and the mold that's growing from that leak and things like that. And it is so incredibly valuable to have a good contractor, someone who really knows what they're doing to go in and make sure everything is right. Because if you don't, you can get burned. And I've heard many a story from people who have had to pay $20, $30, $40,000 in repairs after buying a home because they get screwed over by someone who didn't tell them about this problem that they did not know beforehand. It is a very good idea to pay for home inspection. It's not a requirement. Property valuations for mortgages. Home inspection is not a requirement, but it really is a requirement. You don't have to do it, but it would be really stupid not to. And don't skimp out on that. Really go and get a good contractor for that. Land transfer tax. This varies because some places don't actually have land transfer taxes. Essentially, it's a tax from either your municipality or province or both when you go and buy your home to transfer that land to another individual. And again, this varies by place that you're living. So if you're going to look to buy a home in an area, you're going to need to go to just search online. It's pretty simple. So let's say you're looking to buy a house in Toronto. You would just type in land transfer tax for Toronto in Google, and it should pop up with whatever percentages it would be. And if you are living in Toronto, it is going to be fairly expensive for you because they have that municipal and they have that provincial tax. And it's going to be on a percentage basis. So if you're buying, say, $600,000 home in Toronto, you're going to pay a significant amount of money for that land transfer tax. But again, some places don't have it at all, so it's a very good idea to check that out before you look to buy a home, because in some places that's going to add thousands of dollars on, in some places it's going to be nothing. So very relevant when you're deciding on buying a home. Property survey. Again, this varies because your property might be bigger or smaller, it depends on the size. But essentially, it's when you have a surveyor come through and actually define what you're actually buying property-wise. Sort of the size of the land, the lot. They check for easements and things like that. So an easement being, it might be a situation where your neighbor has the right to use your property for a driveway kind of thing, where they use the land but technically it's your land, and it just sort of finds all of these things and sort of defines the property that you're looking to buy. And again, it varies because if you have a 300-acre property, it's going to cost more than a 1-acre lot. Legal fees. Your legal fees are for the lawyer that's going to draw up your contract. Again, it's not a necessity, but it's one of those expenses that it's worth just paying for it. The legalese and making sure that you don't get screwed for some random reason is very valuable. It is really important. It's, these two things, again, not necessities, but they really, really should be. And you want to go through a lawyer. Again, the cost is going to vary where you live and who you decide to go with, but just having someone draw up the contract is a very valuable thing to have. Make sure there aren't any mistakes, make sure it's streamlined, nothing that sort of pops up and burns you afterwards. And the last one, title insurance. Title insurance is essentially when you go to buy a property, say with a mortgage, the bank has a lien on that property. So they have the right to take that property back and sell it until you've paid down your mortgage. So when you get a mortgage, the bank gets a lien on your property. Well, what title insurance is, it's essentially when you go to buy a property, it protects you against pre-existing liens on that property. So let's say you're going to buy some land from someone, and they had 3 mortgages on that property before, and they had 3 liens on that property before, but they didn't tell you about that. So they sell you their property and then leave, and they're out of the picture. You would get screwed over because 3 banks would have liens on your property. They would have the right to your property because they've not been paid back. And that's what title insurance does. It protects you against getting screwed over by pre-existing liens against your property. It is very much an optional thing. It's really, do you want to take on the risk of having sort of that issue present itself? It is ultimately up to you on how comfortable you are with risk. It's not a necessity, but it does protect you against issues like the liens. This is, so a fairly good approximation. It should give you a fairly good ballpark for what kind of closing costs you're going to have. If you live in a place that doesn't have land transfer taxes, it's probably going to be in the realm of $2,000 to $3,000. If you live in a place with land transfer tax, $2,000 to $3,000 plus whatever your land transfer tax is going to be. And so hopefully that has helped you know a little bit more about buying a home, and that there are some additional expenses you're going to have to pay when you go to buy. As always, if you like the video, very much appreciate a like, share, and subscribe, and